Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. Joining me today are Budget Secretary David Brinkley and my Chief Legislative Officer, Kiefer Mitchell. Tomorrow morning, we will be hosting all of the fiscal leaders of the legislature from both parties at Government House for a fiscal summit breakfast as we officially submit our FY 2021 budget. Last week, I stressed that the overall theme of this legislative session should be increasing accountability, and we are following through on that theme here this morning by submitting an accountability budget. Our FY 2021 budget reflects the most important and urgent priorities of Marylanders: crime, education, transportation, and the environment, while keeping the commitment I first made 5 years ago to bring fiscal restraint to Annapolis and to hold the line on unaffordable spending. This budget funds all of the state's top priorities while maintaining $1.3 billion in reserves and limiting budget growth to 1%, without raising taxes, without cutting services, and without raiding dedicated special funds, which had become a common practice in years past. For the sixth straight year, our budget is 100% structurally balanced. As a direct result of our fiscal discipline, belt-tightening, and business-friendly pro-jobs policies over the past 5 years, our state has had one of the best economic turnarounds in America. We went from previously losing 100,000 jobs to, under our administration, gaining more than 140,000 jobs, cutting Maryland's unemployment rate to 3.6%, the lowest that it has been in more than a decade. More businesses are now open and more people are working than ever before in the history of our state, which means we have economic growth and increasing revenues. However, as we have every year, we are strongly cautioning legislators against unsustainable forced spending increases, which now account for 83% of the entire state budget. Let me repeat that. Currently, 83 cents out of every single tax dollar is eaten up by spending which is mandated by the legislature, leaving our administration only 17 cents to work with to do all of our budget balancing, belt tightening, and reining in of spending. As you know, they're attempting to force $33 billion in new additional mandated increases just to pay for their Kerwin plan. For decades, revenues have been somewhat volatile and unpredictable. They can easily be up one year and down the next based on a number of things like changes in the national economy and the stock market, which is why we also want to again remind legislators that we must remain vigilant about maintaining our savings in order to maintain our AAA bond rating and be better prepared for those times when more flexibility is needed, while also being able to make important targeted one-time investments. All of that is exactly what our FY 2021 budget has accomplished. The specific details of the entire budget will be submitted and released tomorrow after we have had the opportunity to fully brief the legislative leaders. But let me just go into a few of the highlights of our FY 2021 budget. The number one concern of Marylanders by far is crime. Citizens are demanding more accountability for the violent criminals who are shooting and killing people in the streets of Baltimore. Just last Saturday, 12 people were shot and 5 people were killed. That's why, in addition to our legislative package to address this crime, we are also providing $74.5 million to fund police aid to local governments. We included $38.7 million for local law enforcement grants, another $3 million to help local law enforcement agencies recruit and retain police officers. Our budget provides an additional $6.9 million to support crime prevention, prosecution, and witness protection efforts in Baltimore City, $2.7 million for the Baltimore Regional Criminal Intelligence Center, and $2.6 million to fund 25 new prosecutor and support staff positions in the Office of the Attorney General that will be assigned specifically to handle cases related to violent crime, firearms, and firearms trafficking and gangs. We're providing $272 million for community and residential operations to provide direct care services to youth under the services of the State Department of Juvenile Services, and to launch the collaborative, comprehensive juvenile crime strategy, which we announced last month, to reduce the number of violent youth offenders in Baltimore City. We're investing another $23 million for Project CORE to tear down more blighted buildings with a focus on high crime areas. And our administration has more than doubled statewide substance abuse funding. We are providing $862 million for mental health and substance abuse programs to help combat the heroin and opioid epidemic, which is driving so much of the gang violence. Once again, our budget provides historically high record funding for K through 12 education. This is our 6th consecutive budget to do so. This budget invests a record $7.3 billion into K through 12 education, which is once again above and beyond the education spending formulas proposed by the legislature. Not only will every single penny that every single jurisdiction anticipates from the state for education be fully funded at 100%, but every single school system in Maryland will once again see increased investment by the state. We're also providing more than $350 million more to fund recommendations of the legislature's Kerwin Commission, and $94 million to expand access to pre-K. Of course, we pushed for, campaigned for, and were successful in getting 80% of the voters to support the Casino Lockbox Initiative, which now requires the investment of an additional $4.4 billion in our local school systems without raising state or local taxes. We recently introduced the Building Opportunity Act, which will provide $3.9 billion in school construction funding over the next 5 years. This is the largest investment in school construction ever in Maryland history, and it will allow us to fulfill every single one of the local funding requests to bring all of our state schools into the 21st century. Reflecting that commitment, our fiscal 2021 budget includes a record $733 million more in additional school construction funding. No governor in the history of our state has ever invested more in K through 12 education. But Marylanders are demanding, and we are pushing for, more accountability in our local school systems to make sure that those dollars are being well spent, that they're making it into the classrooms, and that we are achieving better results for our children. The state should not and cannot, however, simply increase $33 billion in new spending that we do not have without any plan whatsoever about where the funding is going to come from. Our budget will also provide $402 million more for higher education projects, including historically high funding for our community colleges. And once again, we provided additional state investment to hold the line on tuition rates and require that any increases are held to 2% or less. More than 75% of our entire capital budget goes to education. For years, we've been working to move the transformative Howard Street Tunnel project forward. In 2016, we reached an agreement with CSX and the federal government to rebuild this tunnel. After some issues arose with our partner, CSX, unfortunately, after we were on the goal line, we had to go back and start the entire process all over again, which took a couple of more years of putting it back together again. But after our relentless multi-year effort, this project is finally going to become a reality. Last summer, we were successful in securing $125 million in federal dollars, and with the investment of $80 million in this FY 2021 budget, we will be able to move forward on this project, which will break this major East Coast bottleneck by allowing double-stack trains to travel through the Howard Street Tunnel, not just transforming the Port of Baltimore and dramatically increasing production at the port, but stimulating economic development all across the state of Maryland and creating thousands of Maryland jobs. This is one of the biggest economic development, job-creating projects in state history. When it comes to the environment, we are once again fully funding bay restoration efforts for the 5th straight year, including record funding, $57.2 million for the Chesapeake and Atlantic Coastal Bays Trust Fund, which is nearly a 7% increase over last year. We are fully funding program open space and land preservation programs for the 3rd consecutive year. We're very proud of this FY 2021 budget. It has taken a tremendous amount of work over the past year to achieve it, and I want to thank our budget secretary and all of the great people in his department who've worked so hard, along with our team in the governor's office and our entire team throughout our executive departments and agencies for all of their efforts and hard work in preparing it. The submission of the budget tomorrow is the next step in the process. The legislature will have the next 77 days to review it, debate it, make revisions to it, and then pass a final budget. I look forward to working with the House and the Senate in a bipartisan, collaborative fashion, and I'm eager for them to begin their role in the budget process. Thank you, and with that, I'll be happy to take a few questions.